Thank you all for being here this glorious, sunny January morning. My name is Greg Coleridge. I'm with the Move to Amend Ohio Coalition, along with the director of the Northeast Ohio American Friends Service Committee. And welcome, one and all, to this forum this morning on Reclaim Democracy, to commemorate the third anniversary of the Citizens United Supreme Court decision that was agreed to, and as you may know, on January 21st, 2010. This gathering here today is one of many taking place around the country, being coordinated under the auspices of the National Move to Amend, a multi-ethnic and multi-racial coalition that seeks to amend the United States Constitution to create a 28th constitutional amendment that would simply not simply overturn the Citizens United decision, but in addition to that, call for an end to all never intended constitutional rights for corporations and end the constitutional doctrine known as money being equated to free speech. So this gathering today is sponsored by Move to Amend Ohio, along with its Central Ohio affiliates, Move to Amend Central Ohio, as well as the Ohio Public Interest Research Group, Ohio PIRG, as well as Progress Ohio. I'd like to thank three people most responsible for organizing this event today. Michael Greenman, connected to Move to Amend Central Ohio. Tabitha Woodruff, who is the director of Public Interest Research Group here in Ohio. And Brian Rothenberg, who is with Progress, Ohio. And special thank to him for not only co-sponsoring, but also agreeing for us to use this wonderful facility. So I just want to, in brief remarks, say, when you talk about any issue, and here we are, the third anniversary of Citizens United is actually on Monday, but because Monday falls on Martin Luther King Day, Move to Amend Ohio didn't necessarily want to, if you will, compete with that. And so events and activities are taking place all over the country today and tomorrow to commemorate this event. But when one tries to talk about an issue, sort of rule one of a speaker is that you try to connect it with the current topics of the day, right? Well, if you look at what's in the news these days, turn on the TV, at least in popular culture, what's sort of the two main issues you're finding? This thing of catfishing, right? Where there's this football player who is involved in a relationship with a person that turned out not even to be living, but who passed away, supposedly. It turned out to be a hoax. So here's this relationship of a never-existent person. And a second issue is Lance Armstrong, right, being involved in doping and never really, with a straight face for years and years, saying, I was involved in doping and all of that. Well, how in the world does one sort of connect issues of catfishing and doping to issues of corporate constitutional rights and money not being equivalent to speech? That's somewhat of a leap, wouldn't you say? Not really. Because if you think about this notion of a catfish relationship, of an online, supposedly hoax, of where a person was relating to another person that didn't really exist, that being called in the vernacular of catfish, and how the media has just sort of jumped on that. While they've jumped on that issue, the ultimate Moby Dick of a hoax, if you will, in our society is that where we have defined corporations as persons. The ultimate invisible, non-existent human being is that of a corporate person. How in the world can we classify a corporation, which is nothing more than a set of legal documents, as being equivalent with a human being, possessing inalienable constitutional rights? that were intended originally and solely for human beings. Yet this is what has become part of our political reality, with all of the perils political associated with that. And you'll be hearing some of those from other speakers. The other issue about this Lance Armstrong guy, who was, again, for years and years with a straight face, saying that he was not a doper, and turned out, of course, to be a habitual liar. Well, here we have, day after day, uttered by political pundits and politicians, this notion that, well, why, of course, money equals speech. And why, of course, money that is contributed to our campaigns has absolutely and precisely zero connection and affiliation and association with how I vote, what I decide, what I do. With a straight face, politician after politician speaks that with a straight face. Well, increasingly people around the country are realizing that that itself is a hoax. That this notion of money being involved in politics corrupts, distorts, demeans, pollutes, and ultimately results in a decline of real democracy. And that's what Move to Amend seeks to do. This effort that seeks to not only reverse Citizens United, because to simply reverse the Citizens United decision, we would only go back to January 20th, 2010, when we didn't have all that perfect of a democracy then. It's not enough to simply go back to the days when the financial industry still dominated public policy, when environmental organizations, their voices were not being heard as the Monsantos and the BPs of the world were creating laws and writing the regulations that govern their own behavior, when healthcare corporations were defining the terms of what is defined as healthcare and the like. Do we want to go back to those days and call that a real democracy? I don't think so. So Move to Amend and its affiliates and groups around the country, numbering now several hundred, are seeking a constitutional amendment to reverse that. And the way they're doing it, and I will end it here, is simply to say that what's going on here in Ohio, and there are now some 12 affiliates of Move to Amend here in the state, and that has resulted in at least the strategy that Move to Amend is calling for, since it's quite ambitious, is it not, to amend the Constitution of the United States. Only been done 27 times. So the idea is that for that to happen, for that to gain any leverage, any ground, any legitimacy, it's going to have to, as other social movements that have resulted in other constitutional amendments of the past have done, we're going to have to build a genuine, authentic, real social movement. And that can only happen if people on the ground are educating, are advocating, are organizing, and are doing what they can to change the terms of the debate and change the culture where they live. And to that end, communities here in Ohio and across the country now have convinced their city councils to call for such a constitutional amendment. Here in Ohio, Athens, Oberlin, Barberton have citywide, their city councils passed constitutional amendments, as have people via citizen initiative passed these amendments, calling for reversing Citizens United and ending constitutional rights for corporations and ending the notion that money is speech in Newburgh Heights as well as in Brecksville. Brecksville particularly illustrative because that's a community that in 2010 went 2-1 in support of Mitt Romney, yet nevertheless passed this measure. So we believe that this measure is a transpartisan one that goes beyond simply D's and R's. It's not about left or right, it's about who decides, who controls, and do we or do we not have an authentic democracy. So Move to Amend here in Ohio has, besides these aforementioned communities that have already passed these resolutions or initiatives, also have called for, in other communities, campaigns to do the same. And so I will simply end by saying in places like Shaker Heights and Cleveland Heights, there are organized efforts to get on the ballot for this November, and initiatives that call for the Move to Amend language. In South Euclid, Mentor, Lakewood, there are groups coming together. As you may know, here in Columbus, there's a very active effort in which people have approached City Council already this past November, or this past Monday most recently. In Cincinnati, there's an effort to try to get something passed through City Council. In Toledo, the same. In many other communities, in Fremont, Ohio, a City Council resolution is passed. In Defiance, Ohio, again, sort of a red, quote-unquote, city and red county, they have collected enough signatures to get something on the ballot next November. So this issue is transcending urban areas into across the state, and what is going on here in Ohio is simply a mirror of what's going on around the country. This is not a hoax. This is not a myth. This is not lore. This is real. For what we are trying to do is change the terms of the debate to reestablish, or some may say for the very first time, establish real, authentic democracy where we, the people, have power and rights and control over the wealthy few